You know, when you think about a photograph of a family moving into a new home, there's this very specific, almost universal emotional frequency attached to it.
Right, it's a snapshot of pure optimism.
Exactly. I mean, picture this specific image in your mind. It's a bitter Rhode Island winter day. Bare, skeletal branches are scratching against a heavy slate gray sky.
It's a very stark, very cold visual.
Yeah, it really is. And standing in front of this massive, worn-in colonial farmhouse is a family of 7, a mother, a father, and 5 young daughters.
They're probably practically vibrating with excitement, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're smiling. They've just moved in. It's this moment, frozen in time, that just radiates hope.
Because, well, it represents the ultimate American dream for a working-class family. You know, the blank slate, the promise of the future, the security of land, all captured in a single frame.
But then you step outside the boundaries of that frame, and you look at the reality of that physical space.
The broader context?
Right. You listen to the sound of the Rhode Island winter wind howling across 200 acres of completely isolated frozen land.
It's incredibly isolated out there.
So isolated. You hear the creaking of an ancient farmhouse door swinging on hand-forged hinges. You hear footsteps echoing on wooden floorboards that have been walked on for centuries.
And that history is heavy.
It really is. And then you hear a child's voice, basically audible, murmuring from an empty room deep inside the house.
Yeah, that changes the entire tone of the picture.
Completely. Suddenly, that picture of optimism isn't a beginning at all. It's the inciting incident of a nightmare.
Because it is the precipice. It's the moment just before the fall.
Yeah.
Because that family, the Perrins, standing in the snow in January 1971 in Harrisville, Rhode Island, they had absolutely no idea what they were smiling in front of.
Not a clue.
No, they were posing in front of a structure that had been, well, basically waiting for them.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if you are listening to this deep dive right now, you likely know the Hollywood version of this story.
Oh, everyone knows the Hollywood version.
Right. You know James Wan's 2013 blockbuster, The Conjuring. I mean, it launched a billion-dollar franchise. It made everyone completely terrified of the hide and clap game.
That game is pure nightmare fuel.
It really is. And it turned this specific farmhouse into a massive pop culture icon. But our mission for this deep dive is to completely strip away all of that Hollywood gloss.
Which is so necessary, honestly.
It is. We are going to unpack the terrifying, highly documented, and profoundly human reality of the Perron family.
Because we are examining a haunting that didn't just last for a few spooky cinematic weeks.
No, not at all. It was a full, agonizing, decade-long siege.
The contrast between the cinematic narrative you saw in theaters and the documented historical reality is just staggering.
It really is night and day.
The true story is infinitely darker. It is far more complex, and frankly, it is deeply disturbing, precisely because of how profoundly human it is.
Yeah, the human element is what gets me.
Right, it's not just a story about ghosts. It is a story about vulnerability, survival, and the things we are forced to endure.
I am still caught up on the sheer audacity of the real estate market.
Oh, the sale of the house.
Yes. It is absolutely wild to me that a real estate agent could sell a property with 235 years of concentrated, horrific tragedy attached to it without a single disclosure to the buyer.
It's hard to imagine that happening today.
Imagine that transaction. Just here are the keys, the plumbing is a bit old, the roof might need patching. Enjoy the centuries of accumulated despair. How does that even happen?
Well, what's fascinating here is that to truly understand the haunting of the Perron family, you have to look past the family itself, at least initially.
Okay, so where do we start?
You have to understand the geography, the isolation, and more importantly, the historical baseline of the land itself.
The land before the house even existed, or the early days of the house?
Both, really. The sheer volume of documentation surrounding this specific property in Harrisville long before 1971 is extraordinary.
So the haunting was already there.
Exactly. The haunting didn't begin when the Perrons unpacked their boxes. It began centuries earlier. It was built into the very architecture of the town's history.
Wow.
To understand what this family faced, we first have to examine what the soil had already swallowed.
Let's talk about what the soil swallowed, because this place, 1677 Round Top Road, was built way back in 1736 by a man named John Arnold.
A very long time ago.
We're talking pre-Revolutionary War. For the first 2.5 centuries of its existence, it was known as the Arnold Estate.
It was a massive working farm.
Yeah, and it is actually one of the oldest continuously inhabited residential structures in all of Rhode Island.
And across those 235 years, before the Perrins even knew the property existed, 8 generations of extended families lived, worked, and died within its boundaries.
8 generations in one house. That's a lot of living and a lot of dying.
It is. Now, we have to establish a baseline here. Rural living in the 18th and 19th centuries naturally featured higher mortality rates.
Right, obviously. It was a tough life.
We know this historically. You had harsh New England winters, a complete lack of modern medicine, brutal agricultural accidents, and maternal mortality.
Death was just a common visitor to any farmhouse of that era.
Exactly. But the Arnold estate presents something else entirely.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the town records, it presents a statistical anomaly of localized tragedy.
Let's dig into that statistical anomaly, because researchers, and eventually the Perron family themselves, uncovered a documented death count that goes way beyond dying of old age or standard pioneer hardship.
It goes much, much further.
We're talking about multiple drownings in the brook and the small pond on the property.
Which is terrifying.
It is. And not just one tragic accident where a child wandered off. Multiple drownings, children and adults, documented meticulously in town and church records across 2 centuries.
And drowning is a particularly traumatic form of death, especially in an agrarian society.
How so?
Well, it leaves a sudden, violent absence in a tight-knit community. There's no illness to prepare you for it. But the list of anomalies goes further than that.
It always does with this house.
There is a documented hanging of a male family member in the 19th century, classified in the municipal records as a suicide.
Oh, well.
And you have to remember, suicide in that era carried immense social and religious stigma, adding a heavy layer of communal shame and silence to the tragedy.
And then it escalates from self-inflicted violence to actual homicide.
Yes, the axe murder.
An axe murder.
Yeah.
A family member brutally killed by another member of the household, right there on the property.
And this isn't folklore?
No, this is documented in local historical society records. Plus, the records show these strained, anomalous clusters of death by illness.
Epidemics, basically.
Right, not just the standard tragic loss of life you'd expect from a rough winter, but periods of concentrated death across multiple generations. It suggests some sort of intense localized epidemic or contamination that just clung to this specific piece of land.
When you look at the breadth of these events analytically, the repeated drownings, the suicide by hanging, the brutal internal family violence of an axe murder, the devastating clusters of illness, you start to see a pattern.
A very dark pattern.
A pattern that transcends mere statistical bad luck. You are looking at a localized environment of extreme distress.
Yeah, distress is a good word for it.
Andrea Perron, the eldest daughter, who later wrote a deeply detailed 3-volume memoir about her family's ordeal, articulated a profoundly unsettling observation about this history.
What did she say?
She said it was as if the house collected grief.
Collected grief. That concept is chilling.
It's very evocative.
It's like the house is a hard drive that refuses to delete its files.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. I mean, most houses get reformatted when a new family moves in. You paint the walls, you bring in your own furniture, you change the locks, and you overwrite the old data with your own life.
You make it your own.
Exactly. But this house, it just kept saving every single tragic event to the desktop. It never reformatted. It just held on to the raw data of all that suffering.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it forces us to consider the implications of living on land so utterly saturated with documented human suffering.
It's a heavy thought.
We often think of history as an abstract concept. We think of it as words on a page in a town hall basement or dates in a textbook.
Like it's disconnected from us.
Right. But how does a history of violence affect the physical space? Does the environment somehow absorb the psychological and emotional terror of an axe murder?
That's the real question, isn't it?
Does the soil remember the profound despair of a hanging? In the case of the Arnold estate, the historical record suggests that the land did not simply let these events pass into the ether.
It trapped them.
Yes, it retained the energetic residue of the trauma.
And out of all these horrific historical deaths on the property, the axe murders, the suicides, the drownings, only one name was plucked from history to become the face of this haunting.
The one everyone knows.
Right, the Hollywood movie made her a household name. Bathsheba Sherman.
Ah, Bathsheba.
But the truth about who she actually was and how she lived is so much more complicated and, honestly, far more tragic than the cinematic monster we were all sold.
Deconstructing the legend of Bathsheba is crucial to understanding the mechanics of how this story evolved and how history gets distorted.
The movie really did a number on her legacy.
It did. The cinematic Bathsheba is presented as a satanic witch, a one-dimensional embodiment of pure evil who sacrificed a child to the devil in exchange for eternal youth.
Which makes for a great movie villain.
Sure, but the real woman, Bathsheba Thayer, born in 1812 and later married to Judson Sherman in 1844, she was an entirely human figure whose life was systematically destroyed by the sociology of her time.
She lived on or adjacent to the Arnold estate property for a large portion of her life.
She did.
And she lived a long life, actually, dying in 1885 at the age of 73. But her entire legacy, the dark reputation that eventually earned her that Hollywood treatment, it all centers around one specific inciting incident.
The tragedy that defined her life.
Right. She was caring for a neighbor's infant child, and that child died under what the local community deemed suspicious circumstances.
The details of that mid-19th century investigation are grim and require careful context.
What actually happened?
Well, the findings suggested the infant died from an unnatural penetrating wound to the base of the skull.
Oh, that's horrific.
It is. The medical examiners or local authorities of the time felt this specific wound was inconsistent with any sort of accidental death like a fall or a natural illness.
So they immediately pointed the finger at her.
Bathsheba was immediately suspected of foul play. However, and this is a vital historical point that gets completely erased, she was never tried.
Never tried.
No formal charges were ever filed. The investigation was ultimately inconclusive.
But wait, in a small, insular, mid-19th century New England town like Harrisville, you don't actually need a formal legal conviction to ruin someone, do you?
Precisely. You really don't. In a tight-knit agrarian community of that era, reputation was the ultimate currency.
It was everything.
It dictated your economic survival, your social standing, and your physical safety. A whisper network could execute a social death sentence just as effectively as a judge with a gavel.
Wow, a social death sentence.
The suspicion alone, the mere proximity to an unexplained infant death, was enough to completely ostracize her.
I can't even imagine.
Neighbors who had previously been friendly turned their backs. The Whisper campaign decided she wasn't just negligent, they decided she was inherently malevolent.
Hold on, I need to push back on the whole Bathsheba is the villain narrative here.
Go ahead.
Was Bathsheba actually a monster? Or was she just a tragic victim of a 19th century rumor mill?
That's the crux of it.
Because when you look at the
Yeah.
mechanics of how isolated towns operate, it sounds to me like the community just projected their deepest, darkest fears onto a marginalized woman.
That happens very often historically.
They couldn't medically or logically explain this horrific tragedy of an infant dying suddenly, so they needed a scapegoat to make sense of the chaos.
This raises an important question about how historical tragedies get amplified and distorted into supernatural legends over time.
Right, the snowball effect of a rumor.
The real Bathsheba lived an isolated, undoubtedly difficult life following that infant's death. She was a pariah.
So alone.
The supernatural overlay, the rumors of Satanism, the pacts with the devil, the witchcraft, there is absolutely zero contemporary documentation from the 1800s to support any of that.
Zero.
None. Those elements are folklore. They are legends, added layer by generations of townsfolk long before any screenwriter found her name in an archive.
That's so sad.
Her real life was a tragedy of social exile. The supernatural monster was a creation of the community's collective imagination, a way to personify their anxieties.
And she's buried right there in a downtown Harrisville Baptist cemetery.
Yes, she is.
People still visit her grave today because of the movie, often treating it like a haunted tourist attraction.
Which is fairly disrespectful when you think about it.
Totally. The real horror is what the town did to her while she was alive. Yet, despite the fact that the movie version of Bathsheba is largely an invented myth, we cannot ignore the fact that something profoundly malevolent was waiting in that farmhouse.
Oh, without a doubt.
The house had a history of violence long before Bathsheba and long after. And in January 1971, the perfect targets arrived to wake whatever was dormant in that architecture.
The arrival of the Perron family marks the transition from historical abstraction to acute, highly documented modern reality.
Because we actually have the people to talk to now.
Exactly. You have Roger Perron, a pragmatic, hardworking, deeply grounded working-class provider. He was a man who measured success in tangible, physical ways.
He's a skeptic.
Completely. Finding a 14-room colonial farmhouse on 200 sprawling acres for his large family felt like a massive victory. It was the culmination of his hard work.
And then you have Carolyn, the mother. By all accounts, she was the warm, creative, incredibly open, emotional center of this family.
She was the heart of the home.
She really was. She was empathetic and vulnerable in a way that made her deeply attuned to the world around her, which unfortunately made her the prime target for whatever was festering in that house.
Vulnerability can be a beacon.
It definitely was here. And of course, we have the 5 daughters, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April, ranging from ages 6 to 15.
A lot of energy in that house.
So much. They were just a normal, loud, loving family. They were bringing all this chaotic, vibrant, living energy into this massive, ancient frozen space in the absolute dead of winter.
And the warnings began immediately, almost the moment they set foot on the property.
Didn't even have time to unpack.
Not really. As they were physically moving their boxes and their lives into this space, the departing elderly owner, the one who had lived there previously, took Carolyn aside and gave her a profoundly ominous piece of advice.
Just a casual warning.
Well, she didn't elaborate. She didn't offer a history lesson. She simply looked at Carolyn and said, "For the sake of your family, leave the lights on at night."
So what does this all mean?
It's a terrifying thing to hear.
If someone says that to you on moving day, how do you process it? To me, that warning is like walking into a new apartment you just excitedly signed a lease for, and you open the hall closet and find a fully sealed biohazard suit hanging there.
That's a great analogy.
You know instantly, deep in your gut, that something is terribly, terribly wrong. But your furniture is already in the moving truck. You are already locked into the lease. The ink is dry. You are trapped before you even unpack a single box.
Because the parents were pragmatic, grounded people, they initially assumed it was merely the eccentricity of an elderly woman.
They brushed it off.
They rationalized it. But the house immediately began its work. It didn't start with levitating chairs or demonic voices. It started with what Andrea Perron brilliantly categorizes in her memoirs as small wrongnesses.
Small wrongnesses. I love that
It
phrase.
perfectly captures the subtlety of it.
Like brooms left in the kitchen would suddenly be found standing in the dining room. Doors that were firmly latched shut would swing open on their own.
Just little things that make you question your memory.
Right. Food left on the counter would shift position.
Yeah.
Objects on shelves wouldn't just fall. They would be found placed carefully on the floor, as if someone had deliberately moved them.
The psychology behind these small wrongnesses is incredibly insidious.
Why start small, though?
Well, why would an entity start small? Why not just appear and terrify them immediately?
Yeah, get right to the scare.
Because starting small systematically breaks down the family's sense of reality. It targets their fundamental trust in their own perception.
It makes them think they're going crazy.
Exactly. If you misplace a broom, you doubt your own memory. If a door opens, you blame a draft or a faulty latch. It forces the victims to rationalize the irrational.
Wow.
It is essentially environmental gaslighting, constantly keeping them off balance, slowly eroding their sanity before the true, undeniable escalation begins.
And you can't rationalize the smell.
No, you can't ignore that.
That was the first phenomena that really shattered their logic and their ability to explain things away. Multiple family members consistently described this horrific, unexplainable smell of rotting flesh.
It wasn't just a damp basement smell.
Not mold, not old wood, the distinct, metallic, sickening smell of a decomposing body. And it had no source.
It would just waft through the house.
It would just appear in the kitchen or the master bedroom or the cellar, linger long enough to make them gag, and then completely vanish.
The cellar quickly became a focal point of this initial dread.
It's always the cellar.
Now, in an 18th century farmhouse, a dirt-floored cellar isn't unusual. It was the standard method of construction. But this specific cellar possessed an atmosphere that profoundly affected everyone who entered it.
Even Roger.
Especially Roger, the ultimate skeptic who wanted a logical explanation for everything. He would go down to check the heating or the water pump. He described this overwhelming, undeniable sensation of a physical presence standing directly behind him in the dark.
Just breathing down his neck.
He would turn around and there would be nothing. He would turn back to his work and the heavy presence returned immediately.
And Carolyn, using just pure primal mother's instinct, basically instituted an unspoken rule. The girls were absolutely not allowed in the cellar.
She didn't want them anywhere near it.
She didn't even have a logical reason to give them. Her body just told her it wasn't safe. It's like an evolutionary warning system, firing off all its alarms, screaming at her to keep her children away from that specific patch of earth.
That maternal instinct was remarkably prescient.
Because of what they found later.
Decades later, long after the Perrons had left, modern ground-penetrating radar was brought into that cellar by investigators.
Okay, wait. Explain how that works for people who don't know.
Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, works by sending high-frequency electromagnetic pulses into the ground. It measures the reflected signals based on changes in the material properties below the surface.
So it looks for disturbances in the dirt.
Right. When organic material like human remains decomposes, it alters the chemical and physical density of the surrounding earth, creating a distinct signature.
And what did it find in the Arnold estate?
The radar in the Arnold estate cellar detected distinct anomalies beneath that dirt floor, anomalies highly consistent with buried material.
Wait, so they found anomalies consistent with human remains. Why didn't they just dig it up and solve the mystery right then and there?
Because excavation in a residential basement, particularly one with immense historical designation and structural fragility, is a bureaucratic and legal nightmare.
I guess you can't just take a shovel to a 300-year-old foundation.
Exactly. You need permits, you risk undermining the foundation, and if it is a crime scene or a historical burial site, the jurisdiction becomes incredibly complicated.
So they just left it.
Because excavation was never permitted, the physical truth of what exactly lies beneath that dirt floor remains one of the great, maddening, unsolved mysteries of the estate.
Which is absolutely terrifying. You're living above a potential unmarked grave. But the family tried to live normally, right?
They did their best.
They tried for a long time to rationalize the brooms, the drafts, the horrible smells. But the thing is, you can't rationalize it when the house starts getting physical.
The physical manifestations change everything.
The subtle mind games, the environmental gaslighting, eventually shifted into a literal siege.
We are looking at a profound, highly documented escalation from 1971 to 1980.
Nearly 10 years.
A 9-year period where the phenomena evolved from peripheral disturbances into unavoidable, directed, and intelligent aggression. If we break this escalation down categorically, we see a terrifying consistency across all 7 family members, which is exceedingly rare in paranormal case studies.
Let's start with the visual phenomena, because they are absolute nightmare fuel.
They are very vivid.
We aren't talking about seeing a fuzzy shadow out of the corner of your eye when you're sleepy. We're talking about Carolyn waking up in the master bedroom, opening her eyes, and seeing a tall woman with a gray complexion.
Standing right over her.
Dressed in anachronistic clothing, standing right next to the bed, just staring down at her. Every time Carolyn screamed, the figure would simply fade away.
While Carolyn experienced the female entity, the daughters reported a different presence entirely in their spaces.
It didn't just stick to one ghost.
No, it was a male figure for the girls, often accompanied by a sudden unnatural drop in temperature and a specific foul odor lingering in the upstairs hallway in their bedrooms.
Just watching them.
But perhaps the most insidious visual manifestation was the one experienced by the youngest daughter, April.
April's friend Manny. Here's where it gets really interesting, and by interesting I mean deeply, profoundly disturbing on a psychological level.
It's very upsetting.
Little April actually formed a relationship with an entity she called Manny. She talked to him. She viewed him as a genuine friend.
She was completely isolated with this thing.
How does a parent protect their kid when the imaginary friend isn't imaginary? That's fundamentally more terrifying than a monster jumping out of a closet to scare you.
The monster isn't hiding.
Right. The monster is playing with your child in broad daylight.
It speaks to the opportunistic and highly intelligent nature of whatever occupied that space.
It knew how to push their buttons.
It interacted with each family member based on their specific vulnerabilities and psychological profiles. A young child seeks a playmate. The entity provides one, gaining her trust.
And for the mom.
A mother seeks safety and control. The entity invades her most private space, her bedroom, to strip that control away. And then, once the psychological dominance was established, the phenomena crossed the threshold into the physical realm.
Oh, the physical stuff is where the rationalization completely dies.
You can't ignore physical force.
The girls reported their beds slowly lifting off the floor while they were in them. We aren't talking about a tremor or a bed shaking.
Defying gravity.
We were talking about the sheer physics of a heavy wooden bed, with a human being on it, lifting off the ground, like something underneath was pressing up with immense force, holding it there, and then gently setting it back down.
And the movement of objects changed from simple displacement, like moving a broom, to directed, violent hostility.
They were basically under attack.
Things weren't just falling off shelves anymore, they were being thrown. Books, dishes, heavy items hurled deliberately at specific family members.
That's a huge escalation.
This indicates intention. It indicates a mind. The entities were demonstrating a clear awareness of the family and a directed, aggressive response to their presence in the house.
And Carolyn, the mother, bore the absolute brunt of that physical aggression.
She suffered terribly.
She would wake up with unexplainable bruises all over her body, marks on her skin that looked exactly like finger impressions, as if she had been gripped violently in her sleep.
It's assault.
It is. She found deep scratches down her back that she couldn't have reached herself. The house was literally marking her, claiming her body as part of its territory.
What makes this the most documented case in American paranormal history is the volume and consistency of these reports.
So many witnesses.
You have 7 distinct individuals spanning a wide range of ages, cognitive developments, and psychological profiles.
From little kids to adult skeptics.
From a highly suggestible 6-year-old child to a deeply skeptical, pragmatic adult male, and all 7 of them are corroborating these specific physical, visual, and auditory phenomena over the course of nearly a decade.
Let's talk about the auditory phenomena because, honestly, that might be the worst part.
The sounds can really break a person.
The intentional locking in the walls. They knew it wasn't pipes clanking or the wood settling. It was a deliberate 3-beat sequence. Knock, knock, knock.
And it was interactive.
It would actually respond when someone spoke. If Roger yelled at it, it would knock back. If they asked it to stop, sometimes it would. It was an ongoing conversation with the architecture.
Unsettling, to say the least.
They also heard a human female voice echoing in empty rooms, murmuring constantly in a language they couldn't understand. But the absolute worst, the thing that broke even Roger's ironclad skepticism, was the laughing.
The sound of other children laughing within the walls of the house.
Just put yourself in that living room.
It's hard to even imagine.
You're sitting there. You can see all 5 of your daughters reading or playing right in front of you. Every child you own is accounted for. And you hear the distinct, clear sound of little kids giggling and laughing inside the plaster, directly behind your head.
It defies all logic.
I would absolutely lose my mind.
The psychological toll of that environment is unimaginable. You are living in a chronic state of hypervigilance.
Never able to relax.
Your nervous system is constantly flooded with cortisol. You are chronically sleep deprived because the phenomena peak at night.
Exhaustion makes everything worse.
Your senses are constantly assaulted by impossible stimuli. Eventually, that physiological and psychological toll reached a breaking point. Carolyn, physically marked, utterly exhausted, and desperate to protect her family from this escalating violence, sought outside intervention.
She finally cracked.
She reached out for help. And this brings us to the introduction of the most controversial figures in the entire Perron story.
Enter Ed and Lorraine Warren.
The Warrens.
Now, the cinematic universe paints them as these incredible superhero saviors who swoop in with their holy water to save the day.
Hollywood loves a hero.
Ed, the self-taught demonologist, and Lorraine, the clairvoyant medium. By the early 70s, they are already the most famous paranormal investigators in the country. They were cultural icons of the occult boom.
They were very well known.
Carolyn reached out to them because she was drowning, and they were the only ones offering a life raft.
Ed Warren's assessment of the property was immediate, severe, and based on his specific taxonomy of the paranormal.
How did he categorize it?
In his framework, a haunting implies a single human spirit tied to a location. He diagnosed the Arnold estate not as a haunting, but as an infestation.
Infestation. That sounds so much worse.
In his demonological taxonomy, an infestation meant the presence of multiple entities, orchestrated and led by a non-human demonic force of significant power. And he believed this demonic force was using the local legend of Bathsheba Sherman as a portal, a conceptual foothold, to enact its violence on the living.
Let me see if I can translate Ed's taxonomy here.
Go for it.
It's like calling an exterminator because you think you have a few mice in the attic, a haunting. Yeah. But the exterminator shows up, takes one look, and says, no, you don't have mice. You have a massive structural termite infestation that is actively consuming the foundation of your house. And the termites are being directed by a hostile intelligence.
That is a very apt translation.
That is a terrifying escalation of the problem. And Lorraine, with her clairvoyance, backed him up.
She felt it immediately.
She said that the moment she walked into that house, she felt an overwhelming active darkness. She said it wasn't a passive recording of history. It was aware, it was ancient, and it was watching them.
So they decided to act.
So the Warrens decided to conduct a seance. This is the climax of the movie. But the reality of this seance is so raw, so violent, and so ethically fraught.
The seance was conducted by Lorraine, with Carolyn participating as the primary focal point.
But Roger wasn't there.
Crucially, and this is where the ethics of the situation completely disintegrate, this was done without Roger's knowledge or consent. he was not home at the time.
That is wild to me.
The children were supposed to be asleep upstairs, but Andrea, the eldest daughter, sensed something was happening and secretly positioned herself to witness the event.
She saw the whole thing.
What unfolded, which was later corroborated by Andrea, Lorraine, and eventually Carolyn herself, was a profound and violent rupture of normalcy.
According to the accounts, Carolyn began to speak. But it wasn't her voice coming out of her mouth.
It was something else.
It was lower, older, speaking a language nobody in the room recognized. And then, the heavy wooden chair she was sitting in began to levitate,
Lifting right off the ground.
slowly, measurably rising off the floor. And then, with extreme physics-defying violence, the chair was thrown across the entire room, with Carolyn still in it.
An incredibly violent act.
Andrea, hiding and watching this, literally thought she was watching her mother get murdered by an invisible force.
The physical violence of that moment cannot be overstated, but the immediate aftermath is equally critical to understanding the true dynamic of this story.
When Roger got home,
Roger Perron returned home from work to find his wife brutalized, terrified, and surrounded by outside investigators who were conducting esoteric, highly dangerous rituals in his home without his permission.
he must have been seeing red.
His reaction was furious, and rightly so. He threw the Warrens out.
He didn't just politely ask them to leave.
No, not at all.
He physically threw them out of his house and told them to never, ever come back. And look, here's where it gets really interesting.
Perfect.
The movie makes the Warrens look like these flawless heroes who fix everything and restore peace to the family. But looking at the historical facts, didn't they just come in, stir up the hornet's nest without the father's permission, agitate the entities, take some objects as souvenirs for their occult museum, and leave the family in a significantly worse, more violent state than they found them?
That is precisely what happened.
Andrea Perron herself later referred to what the Warrens did as spiritual malpractice.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this clash of ideologies between Roger Perron and the Warrens is fundamentally about boundaries, consent, and the ethics of intervention.
They completely crossed the line.
The Warrens operated under the sincere belief that they were soldiers fighting a grand cosmic spiritual war against demonic forces. In their worldview, the ends, defeating a demon, justified the means.
But Roger wasn't fighting a cosmic war.
No. Roger Perron was fighting to protect the immediate physical day-to-day safety of his wife and children from what he saw as reckless, arrogant investigators who were treating his family like test subjects.
Spiritual malpractice. It's such a loaded, perfect phrase.
It really hits the nail on the head.
Because what are the ethics of paranormal investigation when you are dealing with a real, deeply vulnerable family in a state of chronic crisis? You can't just treat them like a laboratory experiment.
You have a duty of care.
You can't just provoke the anomaly and then leave them to deal with the fallout.
Exactly. The Warrens believed they were offering salvation, but the reality of how that story ended for the Perrons, how the Hollywood movie portrays the ending versus the grim historical truth, is perhaps the most sobering and tragic detail of this entire deep dive.
Because the Hollywood version gives us this neat, tidy, emotionally satisfying resolution.
It wraps it up in a bow.
James Wan's $319 million blockbuster is an amazing piece of cinema. It gets the family size right, the year, the basic escalation of the haunting, the name Bathsheba, and the levitating chair during the seance.
But it changes the timeline completely.
It completely changes the timeline and the ending to give the audience a sense of relief.
A horror movie structurally requires a climax and a defeat of evil. It requires the heroes to win, or at least survive, to see the dawn.
People want to leave the theater feeling safe.
So the film compresses a grueling, agonizing decade of suffering into a matter of weeks. It invents theatrical, cinematic games like hide and clap.
Which doesn't happen.
No. And it culminates in a triumphant, dramatic exorcism performed by Ed Warren that magically cleanses the house and frees the family from their torment.
But there was no exorcism.
None, not at all.
The devastating real resolution to this story is that the Warrens got thrown out, the haunting didn't stop, and the family stayed in that house for 9 more years.
That's hard to fathom.
9 years. They didn't leave in 1980 because they defeated a demon or because a priest saved them. They left because they finally, painfully, saved up enough money to physically afford to move.
The true horror of the Perron story isn't just supernatural, it is a story of profound socioeconomic entrapment.
The real-world horror.
We have to look at the economic reality of the 1970s. You have The Nixon shock, stagflation, skyrocketing interest rates.
It was a terrible time to try and sell a house.
For nearly a decade, this working-class family woke up in terror. They raised 5 daughters in an environment of active, directed hostility, and they starred, enduring daily psychological and physical assault simply because they could not afford to leave.
They were stuck.
Selling a massive, stigmatized farmhouse in a terrible economy was impossible.
A horror movie gives you an escape hatch.
Always.
The credits roll, the monster is defeated, the lights come up, and you go home. Real-life poverty, or even just intense financial limitation for a working-class family, is a maze with absolutely no exit.
You're just trapped in it.
The real monster wasn't just the ghost in the walls. It was the mortgage. It was the bank. It was the crushing reality that Roger had put every single dime he had into this property, and abandoning it meant absolute financial ruin and homelessness for his kids.
A terrible choice to have to make.
They had to choose between living with ghosts or living on the street.
It completely reframes the narrative from a ghost story to a story of endurance.
It really does.
The entity didn't necessarily lose its power. As Andrea Perron acutely observed, the phenomena eventually ceased for them because the family finally managed to relocate in 1980.
They just left the zone.
The entity simply ran out of targets. It didn't die. It just had no one left to torment.
Which brings us to an incredibly chilling point. The Perrons escaped in 1980. They packed up their surviving belongings and drove away.
But the house remained.
But the house didn't go anywhere. The 200 acres of isolated land didn't go anywhere. And the things inside it, well, they didn't leave either.
Bringing the timeline to the present day provides a fascinating and somewhat unsettling coda to this story.
Fast forward to now.
The property at 1677 Round Top Road is now universally known as the Conjuring House. In 2019, it was purchased by Corey and Jennifer Heinsohn, who bought it specifically because of its paranormal history.
They leaned right into it.
They turned it into a paranormal tourism destination.
You can literally go online, book an overnight stay, take guided ghost tours, and shoot documentaries there.
Which many people do.
And hundreds of independent investigators have done exactly that over the last few years. And what they are finding is blowing my mind.
The contemporary documentation is striking from an analytical perspective.
Because they're finding the exact same things.
You have hundreds of independent investigators utilizing modern equipment, digital audio recorders, thermal imaging, EMF meters, and varying methodologies. And they are reporting the exact same phenomena that the Perrons described in 1971. The sourceless smells of decay, the moved objects, the distinct, heavy presence in the dirt-floored cellar.
It provides this incredible retrospective validation for the Perrons.
It vindicates them.
For decades, they were just a working-class family making these wild, unbelievable claims. But now, with high-tech cameras and audio gear and dozens of completely unconnected people reporting the exact same anomalies, it proves that whatever they were experiencing, they weren't making it up.
They weren't crazy.
No, they weren't. But at the same time, imagine surviving 10 years in a haunted house, enduring real, lasting trauma, and then having to spend the rest of your life watching strangers treat your family's personal nightmare like a theme park ride.
It raises profound questions about the modern phenomenon of paranormal tourism.
It's ethically weird.
How do we, as a society, reconcile a family's decade of genuine, inescapable, deeply personal trauma with an industry built on people paying for overnight thrills?
It's tough to balance.
Yet, despite the commodification of their suffering, the Perron family has navigated this modern circus with remarkable grace.
They really have. Roger passed away in 2006, remaining incredibly private and fiercely protective of his family to the very end.
He was a protector.
He was just a dad who tried his absolute best in an impossible, terrifying situation. Carolyn, who endured the worst of the physical attacks, integrated her trauma with such calm resilience over the years.
And Andrea documented it all.
And Andrea, the eldest, took control of their narrative by writing her massive 3-volume memoir, House of Darkness, House of Light. She doesn't aggressively demand that people believe her story.
She just shares her truth.
She just asks for the basic human understanding that they were a real family and this trauma was real to them.
They are not caricatures in a horror film. They are a testament to human endurance, familial bonds, and the will to survive an environment that was actively trying to break them.
So what does this all mean?
It's a lot to process.
We've gone from a shiny Hollywood ghost story to a profoundly real, gritty human saga. We've talked about historical trauma, the devastating mechanics of a 19th century whisper network, a decade-long physical and psychological siege, and the terrifying reality of socioeconomic entrapment.
The full spectrum.
The true story that Perrons completely shatters our fundamental assumption that a home is always a sanctuary. Sometimes a home is a trap.
The dirt floor of that cellar remains untouched to this day.
So there.
The cold spots endure in the exact same corners of the house. The property waited 235 years for the Perrons to arrive. It spent 9 agonizing years feeding on their fear, their energy, and their vulnerability.
And then they got out.
And eventually it let them go. But the house itself and whatever dark, ancient history it absorbed into its foundation never left.
Which leaves us with one final thought for you to chew on today. If a plot of land can truly absorb 235 years of grief, trauma, and violence into its very floorboards, what kind of energy is the space you're sitting in right now holding on to? And more importantly, what are you leaving behind for the next person?